Yeah, much better. Much better.
Okay, then I'll continue with this earphones.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay, cool. Okay, so should I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we are going to have an interesting conversation on the Model Code of Conduct and how it is managing or failing to regulate election campaigning, particularly campaigning which happens online or in a digital mode. Very quickly, I will introduce the One Vote project, myself, and the speaker for today. So the One Vote project is essentially an initiative to explore and to have conversations on use and evolution of technology in elections. Earlier this year, on 25th of January, which was the National Voters' Day, we had an annual conference in which we explored a lot of issues with respect to use of technology in election, right from the use of electoral bonds to issues with respect to surveillance and as well as to issues with respect to how use of Aadhaar, the linking of Aadhaar and voter ID would have negative implications on elections. So the conversation that we are happening today was also originally scheduled for that conference, but due to some reason we couldn't have it on that day. So we are having it separately today. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Mansi. I'm a lawyer and I'm also one of the trustees at the Article 21 Trust. The Article 21 Trust works on issues at the intersection of technology and welfare. And we have been collaborating with other like-minded organizations at the One Vote project. And finally, very quickly, I would like to introduce the speaker for today, Shashidhar. Shashidhar is a faculty at the School of Public Policy and Governance at Azim Premji University. He studied engineering for his undergraduate degree and he later transitioned into public policy through a master's in public policy degree from National Law School, Bangalore. At Azim Premji University, he is currently developing courses on political communication and election campaigns, design and management. He has also been advising student projects related to tracking the implementation of election manifestos. And prior to joining APU, he has also worked as a political consultant and policy researcher in different organizations. So Shashidhar, welcome to the conversation today. And
Thanks,
just to kickstart the conversation, it will be great if you could maybe lead us into the conversation by talking a bit about by introducing the concept of model code of conduct for those who might not know about it or might not understand it properly. So if you could just introduce it for a lay audience, as well as also talk about how it has evolved over the years, what were those circumstances that led to the Election Commission of India coming out with a model code of conduct. So yeah, Shashidhar, over to you.
Thanks, Mansi. Thank you all. Thank you for hosting me for this conversation, for inviting me for this conversation and hosting me. I will start with an overview of model code of conduct. This has been my understanding about how it has its purpose. Let us put it that way, its purpose. So, model code of conduct is generally almost all of us who are interested in elections or who follow elections keenly are familiar with Model Code of Conduct or MCC, at least the phrase, the word. MCC kicks off or kicks in. It comes into operation when the polling schedule is introduced or announced by the Election Commission of India. Generally, about 2 months before the election, depending upon the kind of election that we are talking about. If it's general election, it will be about 3 to 4 months before the election date, or if it's the state election, maybe 45 days to 2 months before the election date. The polling day Election Commission announces the schedule of the elections. That is, it says it gives the timeline of events. That particular day, from the day that particular schedule is announced, the model code of conduct kicks in. So when broadly the function of model code of conduct, it is to make sure that all political parties uh, make sure all political parties and candidates of the political parties and different campaigners and the representatives of the political parties or candidates follow certain guidelines which actually these are like fair play game rules. This MCC was actually if we look at the history of MCC, the MCC was, I think, if I remember correctly, it was in 1960. The political parties in Kerala have come up with a agreement saying that during the general elections, these are the rules that we are going to follow to make sure that everyone there is a fair election that happens. Then the same MCC or the guidelines, the code of conduct was again introduced, adapted by different state governments in 1962, 69. Then I think if 1979, or 79 or 74, 79, yes, 1979, Election Commission of India has come up with a comprehensive guidelines which is called as model code of conduct. So whichever the guideline that we are talking about, or whichever version of the MCC that we are talking about, all these guidelines were created after consulting or in consultation with the political parties. So it's like a gentleman's agreement between political parties that we are going to play fairly. It's more like that. Then eventually, over a period of time, the ECI started implementing the MCC more stringently, especially the part 7 of the MCC, which talks about the roles and responsibilities of the party in power. So it has been observed that the political parties in power are using the government infrastructure during the campaigns. Therefore, ECI has started enforcing this particular, enforcing MCC, especially the part 7, very strictly. And then I think after a Supreme Court judgment, the manifestos have also come under MCC, which actually mandated the political parties to come up to submit the election manifestos. And then reporting of criminal cases, that was also changes that was part of nomination process, but that is also moderated or monitored by under MCC. Then then the recent changes or the recent additions to the MCC is about the role of social media regulating the social. So this is broadly the evolution, the picture of evolution of MCC from 1960, which was at that time an agreement between political parties in the state of Kerala, to today where it stands, where the MCC is the MCC is the source of power for election commissions or different CEOs, chief electoral officers, or district electoral officers, or returning officers during the election campaign period. In fact, there are cases where the chief electoral officer has a power to transfer the chief secretaries and DGPs also during the elections. If they find that they are supporting the government or they are helping the government, which is actually a violation of MCC. And so there are few proactive, there were few proactive chief electoral officers who actually looked into all the files that passed through the secretary. So they had mechanisms in place to make sure that no file or no financial budgetary allocation that happens or spending that happens violates the MCC. So that's the power of MCC in a way, but again, since it does not have a statutory backing, it is more an executive decision making system. It depends always. These such kind of systems depend on the role of depend on the executive who occupies the office or who takes the position in the office. So therefore, you will find a subjective assessment or which of the implementation of MCC, and it's not uniform across all states. And there are now we keep hearing cases about the biasness of the CEOs who actually implement the MCC, who are at the helm of affairs of implementing it, inclined towards one or other political party because of their own vested interests. So anyway, that's the discussion. That's a different discussion, but that's the power of MCC. Though it's a small document, it is too powerful if it's implemented properly.
Thanks, Shashidhar. And I want to just dwell for 1 minute on two things that you said. One was that the party in power has an undue advantage. I think that is sort of like given in the political reality of the country, especially if it is not a situation of gross anti-incumbency. And second is that the model code of conduct only comes into play on the date on which elections are announced. And there have been instances, I'm sure you have also noticed, there have been instances and which actually raise questions on the independence of the election commission, where it has been alleged that they have deliberately delayed on announcing election dates just to give the government and the party in power some more time to do some more things, announce some more schemes, because as soon as the dates are announced and the model code of conduct is in place, then they are not able to announce any new scheme or anything else to influence the voters. So I'm sure you've also sort of like come across those instances. So I just want to quickly delve on that, because we'll also bring it up later when we discuss how the model code of conduct is either managing to or failing to curb or rather regulate elections online. So very quickly, I mean, now that we have spoken about the introduction and how MCC has evolved, and taking from the last point that you left, which is that you said that it remains, it is not, it does not have the force of law as such. It is not really mandatory. So if you could talk about what kind of challenges are faced, one, by the election commission, and of course your own experience of working as a political consultant and with political parties. If you could also give some examples of how parties try to evade the implications of model code of conduct, to try to avoid running into the challenges that come from MCC, and similarly what kind of challenges the election commission faces in trying to extract compliance from political actors. So yeah.
I will start with the few cases, a couple of cases about how the incumbent governments or the politicians from the incumbent government who are holding offices have been penalized for their violations. And at the same time, but again, I'm giving the caveat to this, these are only few cases. But there are election commission is quite infamous for not addressing the violation cases immediately. So when there was when there is an argument about giving MCC a statutory status, what the election commission's argument is that if you give a statutory status, there is a procedure established, and therefore for every grievance or every complaint will have to it will have to reach to the court, or there should be a legal authority that needs to address this particular grievance. Whereas MCC violations have to be addressed immediately. Therefore, as an executive power, it should remain as an executive power. This is the argument. Whereas when it comes to the executive powers or the executive powers of the election commission, as you have quite rightly mentioned about the schedules itself. there were cases in the recent past, even earlier also. I remember during 2014 time, or 2014 or 2013, one of the election commissioners has flagged this issue, saying that we are trying to fix a schedule, and as and when we decide or we talk about a date, I keep getting calls from the minister or someone from the ruling political party who are trying to influence my decision as an election commissioner. But that has been in 2013. But later on, we have also come across various cases where election commission has called for a press conference in the morning to release the polling dates, but they waited for the prime minister's public address or public rally to end in one of the states that is going for elections, and then in the evening they've announced. So uh, do you want to do you want do I mean, if you can we find a cause and effect or causal relationship? No, it's the discretion of the bureaucrat, since it's an executive power. But yes, it is how it has been. Uh, when it comes to violation of cases, I think there were two cases when I was doing my research I found interesting. One was in 2003. At that time, the Punjab Chief Minister was Amrinder Singh, who used his official helicopter to go for the campaign in Madhya Pradesh. Then Election Commission identified that as a violation of MCC, which is a violation of MCC, and they made him pay the entire trip cost, the to and fro of the helicopter. That was been one case. And during 2014 election campaign, uh, Mr. Amit Shah was banned in Uttar Pradesh to do the election campaign because the election commission, I noted that he has been making provocative statements related to religious affairs. Therefore, he is not allowed to campaign in the state. Uh, that's when again Mr. Shah apologized to the election commission, saying that apologize, not but saying I'm not going to invest in such activity. Later, he was allowed to continue his campaign activities. So, well, if the executive or the bureaucrat is inclined to implement MCC with the letter and spirit, then yes, it has effects. But again, we should also, when we are trying to understand the implementation of a model code of conduct, I think at a broader level, we should also have an idea of how election campaigning works, how election campaigns happen. So that's when. So if you look at different aspects under which you can raise complaints with file complaints with election commission with respect to MCC violation, you will get a clear understanding of how a campaign works, or what are the areas in which the election campaigning infringes upon or violates the MCC. So yeah, I think broadly this is what I think.
Yes, so you'll be explaining about that different aspects of campaign.
Yes. That so. Firstly, we should the model code of conduct. In order to understand the model code of conduct, we should make sure that we should understand that this is largely connected with the campaign activity that happens. That is how the people, the candidates or the political parties are positioning themselves. What is their campaign activity? And so, with respect to on-ground campaigns, or with respect to personal campaigns, and with respect to media campaigns, how they run, with respect to the advertising that they want in media outlets, then now the social media. So broadly, if we look at, let's take an example of a political party. A political party, in what ways can it connect with the voter? That is what will happen. So if we, so one way could be to do a in-person direct one-to-one conversation with the voter, or public rally, or doing let's say media advertisement, media campaign, on-ground public addresses, then posters, the wall paintings, posters, this sort of campaign marketing activities. So all these areas, all these spaces in which the interaction between the campaigner and the citizen takes place are more or less regulated by the model code of conduct. So if an election, so from this is a broad idea I would want you to keep. So then if you look at, so that's when the actualization of this model conduct, the violations or the structure of these violations will come into place. So for example, you cannot, one of the rules is that when a campaigner cannot stick bills onto the walls of the government schools or public property anywhere. That's one of the, that if a campaigner does that, it's a violation. Similarly, media advertisements. So every advertisement should have a mentioning who is advertising it, through whose money it is being advertised. So these are some and there is a media committee formed by the Election Commission for media at district level as well. So these committees have to clear these ads which are being published in the newspapers or any other media platforms. But again, this is not applicable to social media. They've said that we will. So for example, I think Facebook and Google asked for these certificates, whereas Twitter banned the ads. Twitter does not allow political advertisement, but other social media platforms, they do not ask for such a certificate from the Election Commission. That is, the Election Commission generally clears any particular advertisement that the party or the candidate wants to put in place. So yes, broadly, if we want to understand the model code of conduct, what we'll have to bear in our mind is that the model code of conduct moderates the relationship between or moderates the interaction of the campaigner and the citizens. So that's so let's call them voters, okay, and the voters.
Okay. So, so yeah, I think we will now, shift to talking about digital campaigning and the challenges of MCC there. But just before that, I wanted to ask you one question because you mentioned that there have been instances where, like you gave the example of Amit Shah being banned from campaigning for a speech that he gave. And something similar happened with a couple of other candidates as well. I remember in 2019 elections, Lok Sabha elections, I think it also happened with Sadhvi Pragya Thakur also, and a couple of other political candidates. But in your experience of working with political candidates, do you think this kind of ban is effective? Does it dent? I mean, not dent, but I mean, the fact that it should be seen as some kind of punishment, right? You have violated the model code of conduct and you are being punished with a ban. That is, in very crude and simple terms, that is how it should be understood. But does it really act as a punishment? Does it have any negative impact on the campaign of a political candidate?
It's a subjective assessment. So for someone like Amit Shah, if he's banned from doing the election campaign, I think it will have an impact on the entire state, because at that time he was heading the operations of entire Uttar Pradesh. So he will have to be on ground. So therefore, since he realized that it will have a negative impact, he was ready to apologize and move forward. So, but and also, since it was Amit Shah, the case was handled fastly. But there are a lot of cases pending with the Election Commission. So this is one of the critics of law, critics or criticism that ECI faces, and a lot of activists complain about this. When they file a complaint with the Election Commission about MCC, most of the times they take time to act. By the time they decide on it, or they start the hearing process, the election will be over. And the Election Commission's response is that since elections are already over, we cannot take, no punishment will help. As in, because the scope of the punishments, the scope of the penalties is very limited when it comes to the election, when it comes to violation of MCCs. So this, it has certain PR value.
Okay.
but it depends. The PR value depends on the candidate against whom the penalty is imposed.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so now taking the conversation ahead to digital campaigning. So I mean, like you said, that the model code of conduct regulates the interaction between a political candidate and the voters or the audience. But the kind of challenges that the election commission faces in implementing model code of conduct in the offline world perhaps multifold when it comes to digital campaigning. One, because of the reach. One, because of the fact that a message that's been sent out could continue circulating even if a particular ad is in violation of MCC. It gets to be banned later, but it might have already reached a number of places from which it's difficult to recall it, etc. So a whole new range of sort of like challenges would have come up with respect to digital campaigning, and especially when social media, political parties came to rely on social media so heavily. So I also remember in 2019 elections, the election commission sort of tried to bring in place some kind of guidelines for social media to follow, and some of these social media companies, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc., tried to comply with it. They tried to show that they were now more proactively regulating content online, especially political advertisement. So yeah, so if you could just sort of talk about what according to you are those new unique challenges that election commission faces in trying to implement MCC on digital campaigning.
Thanks, Mansi. That's a very short question which has a very elaborate answer with different strings attached from different directions. Firstly, I would like to start by saying that Election Commission of India, or to that matter, any one of us who follow elections, struggle to identify one particular problem that caused by social media in the election space. When I say this, we all know that social media, the advent of social media, and the kind of effect that the social media has on electoral democracies is, I would say, it's more negative than positive. And I might definitely not get a job anytime in future in any social media company, but I'm sure, and that's where I start with. And none of us understand, or it is understand the complexities that are involved in the social media platforms. As someone who comes from a technical background can explain how an algorithm works. But that's not the only problem, right? We are, as a policy researchers, we know that it's a complex problem. I mean, the ecosystem has multiple strings that contribute to a problem, and there are multiple levers. So this complexity, I'm sure a lot of researchers are working on giving a framework to this complexity. But I'm 100% sure that Election Commission of India is not has not taken, I wouldn't say has not taken it seriously, but in 2014 it was not serious about social media. But it definitely for sure does not understand the complexities involved in social media spaces. I mean, involved in digital campaigning and social media spaces. It's because they don't know how to regulate. In fact, if you or me, I mean, if myself or you, we are in the shoes of an election commissioner, we don't know where to start. So I would start with, so this is the election commission started with the political parties. They have asked the political parties to report their details of the social media handles. That's fine. They have reported their social media handles. They have given every candidate gives his or her follower details. And if a candidate puts in a message through through the official handle, and if that message is flagged as a violation of MCC, then maybe they can take an action. Maybe they can ask the candidate to remove that message, which did not happen till now. Which did not happen till now. Let me put it that way. Only there was one case, or there were very few cases. And the other issue is, it's not the candidates who actually do the campaigns or do the activities. It's more the supporters of or there are these supporters who cannot be regulated, and there are these the troll armies, as they are called. These people are there on the social media platforms who amplify the messages, and there are these influencers. That's another set of another group of people who can amplify the message. So it's on social media. It's more the battle of narratives, and who amplifies the message that fits into the narrative. So when it comes to this space, the election commission is helpless at this point of time. They have committees, they have district social media committees, constituency level monitoring groups, but they can only ask the candidate. They can only ask the social media company to remove a message which they said, if it's a violation that the election commission identifies as a violation, then they will remove it in 3 hours. But it's not. It is very. So it's only limited people who are officially or formally on the social media platform who can be regulated. The other issue that is the other issue is about CVigil app, which I've realized. As you must be aware that the Election Commission has launched an app called CVigil, where citizens can report the violation of MCC, where on the app, and the Election Commission investigates that particular incident, and then they'll take an action if they identify it's a violation. If you look at the categories under CVigil app, categories under which you can report the violation, there is nothing related to social media. So that has been intriguing me. So we are talking about. So we have moved from on-ground campaigns to digital campaigns, and the election commission realized that we need to regulate, or we need to look into the social media and elections, or the campaigns, or the activities on social media. But still, a citizen, if as a citizen we identify any violation of MCC on social media, we cannot report it. That's a challenge. So I feel it has not yet reached that level of a complete understanding where they can actually formulate rules and identify violations of the campaigns.
So, in the annual conference that we had in January, we had this one talk on political advertisements online, especially on Facebook, where using the Facebook's API, through which you could track, who has put up a particular political ad, etc., and how much funding has gone into it, etc. But it was very interesting to see that Facebook also, as an an entity which is sort of has to, the kind of relationship that perhaps Election Commission of India, or the responsibility that it has, is different from the kind of responsibility that a private organization has. And yet a lot of this regulatory power has been given to a private entity to sort of screen which are the political advertisements which should go online, and also a lot of it depends on how much a particular entity is paying. And there was also another investigative report which had come out a couple of months ago, which showed that these different social media entities, especially Facebook, were charging very different rates from different political parties. And so, of course, any political party which has a higher paying capacity would be much, much, much well placed to have their advertisements going. But it's very interesting that all of these kind of issues which are coming up, it doesn't seem like any kind of conversation is happening, especially or being initiated from the side of election commission. I mean, the only kind of things we see coming out from election commission are Aadhaar and voter ID linking, which do not even have any kind of proof or evidence that it works or it will lead to the kind of success that they are hoping it would, or the kind of benefits that they are hoping would come out of it. Or there are conversations around simultaneous election and the cost saving it will lead to. But it doesn't seem like there are enough conversations happening, especially, like you said, that the Election Commission of India might not even know where to start. And even then, it doesn't seem like that with civil society or with political parties there are any kind of conversations happening. Do you think it's more like that it's just sort of best to keep the space open and to see how things emerge, instead of trying to proactively do anything? Do you think it could be a case of that, or is it just that, I mean, this is a beast that we just cannot control?
I mean, it's at this point, it looks like a beast which cannot be controlled, but uh, it is actually, it is not helping in progressive democracies. I mean, it is we as a citizen, uh, we are exposed to different messages which largely fall in the categories of fake news slash misinformation slash something another any other category, and which is not regulated. So well, there is this debate of free speech versus uh, uh, democracy, accountability to democracy. So that's the debate. I mean, honestly speaking, I don't have an answer for it, but I don't believe that it anything, or like if we want the democracy to survive, certain things have to be regulated. In fact, I mean, it's not. I'm not. I mean, it's not that it needs to be banned, but it needs to be regulated. There are different mechanisms which can be operationalized to make sure that it is regulated. So, I mean, see, I'll tell you. I mean, I think I'm the optimist in me is talking. So, from 1960 till 1991, when Mr. T.N. Seshan has took up the office, till that time we didn't know that MCC was powerful or MCC has these many powers. So I think it is one good bureaucrat and one good in a position. The things might change. That's an optimist in me who's talking. Uh, but I think I feel you cannot leave it, or you cannot make it, or you cannot leave it as a responsibility of the social media platforms. The state, especially election commission, has to play a key role, and so at least to start with, they should give a platform for citizens to report such kind of campaign activities that are happening. Uh, so there, if I would complain something which falls in the category of fake news, there should be some action that needs to be taken. Someone has to act on it. So I initially tried to draw, or for my understanding, tried to draw parallels between a newspaper versus a social media platform. This is a paper print media, and this is a social media. But then I realized that I think my attempt is wrong, because print media, the space is limited. Firstly, the newspaper has limited space, and the editor regulates it, and the editor is made accountable. If a paid news article or is published, or if an editorial is published, then the editor is made accountable. But what happens in the social media? Like, the space is vast. There is no limit. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an opinion. So earlier, people with opinions were called armchair activists. Now everyone is a what do I call mobile activist. So everyone who has a mobile or who has access to a social media platform has an opinion. And again, in our imagination, the popular imagination, we only talk about Facebook, Twitter, or now the conversation is about Instagram and WhatsApp. WhatsApp, we don't know how to regulate it also. We don't know what can be done because every political party has so they have like how they have booth level workers to do campaigns. There are booth level social media actors, social media members of the party whose main job is to manage WhatsApp groups. And how can we regulate it? We don't know. I mean, can you regulate it? We can't. At this point, there is no manpower with the election commission. So it, but how the kind of messages that circulate also, that's another issue. So though political parties say that we are not advertising on a particular issue. Then I was reading this interesting article, I think media piece, if I remember correctly. So this particular journalist was saying that if BJP may not put an advertisement related to Ram Mandir, but if a political party, if some other organization is paying for an advertisement related to construction of Ram Mandir, definitely that connects with the narrative of the political party. Similarly, this is a similar case that when I was doing the campaign, but this was a similar case that we were facing. So, similar case. So there was related. There was a issue. I think it was gender related. It was a sexual assault against a woman, and that's when different parallel campaigns have started. So nothing was initiated by the political party directly. But the message like connects to the narrative of the opposition party. So this is a complex system. My point being.
I think Sankarshan has a question. Sankarshan, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the topic that you brought up, and I was waiting for TVS to respond to it. So, if the model code of conduct is unable to keep pace with how social media messages flow and how they're inexpensively copied over and multiplied many times, I mean, what's the way out? Do we continue to have this slightly limping model code of conduct that causes no end of unhappiness across everyone where we wish for a change? Or are there ways to really move it from a very discretionary to a more feedback, data-driven way where evidence is submitted can be quickly verified, validated, and then some decisions arrived at?
I think that's one of the ways to start with because I feel it's a digital space, so we can come up with technology solutions which can solve these problems. Firstly, I think the election commission should start having active citizen groups involved at a constituency level. Like, for example, there are these flying squads. Whenever there is, so I'll give you an example of how a complaint is addressed if you make it through a C-Vigil app. So what happens is you report an incident on a C-Vigil app saying that there is money being distributed in this particular, I'm giving you an example, in this particular constituency. So immediately the person who in the election commission, whoever is looking at this, will look at the evidence that you submitted and immediately will ask the district returning officer of that particular, in which the particular constituency falls in, and the flying squads to immediately rush to the space. So this case, they've said the election commission has given one such case on their website saying they could identify the violation within 81 minutes of being reported. So yes, 81 minutes of being reported. So there are such kind of mechanisms have to evolve in order to regulate the social media activity. That's what I sense at this point of time. And also there should be awareness, the awareness campaigns also, EC should focus more on the awareness campaigns as well. And I'm sure there will be, I think with the kind of innovation that is happening every day, there will be a technology solution that comes into operation soon for such a problem. So, but I think to start with election, I mean, we cannot do away with model code of conduct, because that is what is actually bring some, at least some sort of accountability within the election process. Whether my, as a citizen, I have some confidence whether my issue is resolved, or but at least the politicians actually fear for MCC violation. Let me put it that way. So, and they make sure that they actually do not, their activities do not violate. So, therefore, I think the scope of MCC should be made more broad, and I think the role of social media and how violations, or maybe a protocol to report the violations and the action of MCC and the actions that ECI can take has to be discussed, debated, and should be in operation as soon as possible. This is broadly my answer. I mean, I'm sure that this is not a definitive answer to your question, but this is what I can think of.
Shashidhar, I want to try and bring together 2-3 different strands which have come out of this conversation. So one is that initially how we spoke about, that where you tried to sort of explain how MCC evolved, and you said that it evolved from a gentleman's agreement among the political parties themselves. And the idea not just seems to be to regulate the interaction between political parties and their voters, but also to sort of create a level playing field, because you want to keep the elections as fair as possible. We also discussed about how incumbent government has a definite advantage and would want to exploit that advantage as much as possible. So it seems like we have reached a situation where coming up with any kind of regulation of political advertisements and campaigning online would not be seen very positively, not just by the party in power, which is, of course, exploiting it to the maximum advantage possible, and also given the fact that it has humongous resources at its disposal, and no other political party even comes close to the ruling party in terms of that. But also that perhaps there is also no consensus among parties themselves on whether this needs to happen and the extent to which this can happen, because everyone sees advantage of that kind of speech online where everything goes, and by the time any action is taken, the deed is done, and whatever benefit you can get out of it, you are able to get out of it. But at the same time, another interesting development is that the government does want to regulate social media, at least to keep a check on speech which might be critical of the government. So we are seeing all these social media intermediary guidelines that the government is coming out with, and the government wants to keep a very close watch on what is being said on social media. So it seems like the conversation, anything that citizens are saying with respect to the government, or the opponents or the opposition are saying with respect to the government wants to keep a very close tab on it. But when it comes to what its own political actors might be saying online, that is what they would rather let go, and keep it out of the radar. So I just think if we try to piece all of this together, it just seems like it might be very difficult to bring different political actors to some kind of a conversation on a table or consensus that there is a need to regulate political speech online, and hold the political actors accountable for everything that sort of comes online in terms of campaigning. So yes, that was just an observation, but yeah, your thoughts on that.
See, at this stage, I mean, I agree with what you have said. It is difficult to bring all political actors together, all political parties together on this particular issue of social media activity. But I mean, yes, I think that at this point, I feel maybe ECI can take a position. ECI can take a position and start So now that the SOP is clear, how a government can influence a social media company, the SOP is already in place. And during from the date of announcing the schedule, ECI has all powers as any government. I think they can always open a channel with the social media ad company. And then once that happens, then I think some damage can be controlled. So but again, I was reading this report yesterday while I was preparing for this conversation. So it's not just political parties. So any money or any advertisement that a political party places or the money the political party pays for can be regulated or can be monitored. So that's what Facebook was. I think Facebook has submitted the financial report, which says that I think BJP has spent about 4 crores or something on about 50 ads, whereas the Facebook page of Nation with Namo and some other, I think Desh Ki Man Ki Baat, I think these two Facebook pages, which are operated out of BJP's office, but not BJP's official handles, political handles. They have spent close to 30 crores. Correct, I mean, subject to correction, the number is subject to correction, but about 4,800 ads they have placed, which do not fall under the MCC or the Election Commission of India cannot manage. Unlike US, in US, any ad can be which is paid for any political ad is actually regulated, but in India it is not the case. So I think it's something like the work that ADR does. They realized that there are criminals in politics, and they wanted their activities around cleaning politics or making politics free of criminals. Uh, there is some progress in their activity, there is some progress towards their vision, but it's a long journey. So I think that's where I stand. I mean, I don't have an answer, Mansi, because I've been as a campaigner and as a researcher, I'm trying to find answers for this. I mean, I thought maybe some matured Western democracies. So when I say mature with respect to technology, uh, I thought they will have some solutions, or they could find some solutions, but they are still struggling. So they are struggling for the last 3 elections. If I remember, 3 general elections, like US had 2 general elections, which had a higher social media impact. Even Europe, the Brexit issues. I mean, it's not an election campaign, but it's a political campaign. That was for which a referendum happened. So it's fake news, misinformation, and everything.
So Chantal has shared a question, and I just want to sort of like add to it. So she's asking, can you explain how campaigns view MCC and if they see it as a major hindrance? But I also wanted to ask, so we have MCC, and then separately we have electoral offenses and corrupt practices, etc., which actually are, a part of the law under the Representation of People's Act or under IPC, and somebody can be charged with an electoral offense, can be prosecuted, etc. So I mean, just like sort of to weigh which is seen by political parties as more onerous or something that they need to be more mindful of, or that they know that neither will properly be enforced. So we can just do whatever we want to do. So yeah.
The political parties take MCC seriously. So, in fact, every political party will place a bunch of lawyers who are specialized in electoral laws at the doorstep of election commissions, like the Central Election Commission, the State Election Commission, during the entire period of campaign. So, they take firstly, there will be petitions reporting the violation of opposition candidates. and there will be petitions which are against them, which they'll have to respond immediately. Because if they are not available, the election commission gives an order, passes an order, then immediately the entire campaign gets disturbed. So they will have to jump in there. So I once remember, so one of the star campaigners was doing the campaign at around, I think after 5 o'clock or something. Then immediately the ruling party, the ruling party's lawyer filed a complaint, and when the election commission was hearing the petition, this lawyer was not available. So immediately the candidate was, the person, the star campaigner was asked to leave the space and report to the city or come back to the capital city, and which caused a disturbance for the entire campaign plan for the next few weeks. Then again, this was challenged, and this was taken up at the higher level, that is the election commission. The point being that all political parties, all campaigns, all campaign teams take MCC seriously, and they actually fear for MCC. Therefore, they also realize that they also find ways to violate MCC without it, because if they know the effect that MCC has on campaigns, and they know the impact of violations or the penalties associated with the violations. Therefore, they will be careful in violating, but they will violate as well as they take it seriously.
Yeah, so I guess we have more or less reached the end of the conversation, and the very last thing that we had on our list to discuss was the need to reimagine the model code of conduct. So yeah, your final thoughts on that, and we'll close with that.
I think these thoughts I've already shared with us to respond to Sankarshan's question. But yes, those are broadly my thoughts. That is, I feel involvement of citizens more proactively, and coming up with SOPs with which they can regulate the social media activity is a good starting point. And I think citizens should also know about the role of social media in campaigns, and what sort of messaging or what sort of messages they face or they are exposed to during the social media during the campaign period, and what is the impact of these messages. Because what happens is this is like the WhatsApp forwards that you receive. Most of them it's the algorithm that works. On social media, it's the algorithm. WhatsApp, it's your behavior, right? Like, okay, you feel associated with that, then you follow that. But I think the larger link between the narratives and messages has to be discussed openly. More public debates have to happen on this. And the social media election commission should have the social media teams exclusively. At the constituency level, in fact, at a more booth level is what my imagination is, like how they have booth level polling officers and polling. They should also have a social media person or someone who looks at the implementation of MCC with respect to social media. That's an extreme position, but and also to start with, I think election commission should formulate the rules and regulations first. And they should initiate a larger debate on how this can be regulated. Then the rules and regulations should be framed. Then the implementation part is where how it can be implemented.
I think with social media or digital campaigning, it just seems like a game of want of a better word, it's like a cat and mouse chase. By the time ECI will figure out how to regulate social media as it stands currently, it would have evolved to a completely different level altogether, and then they'll have to figure out how to manage that. So it'll always, I think as regulators, we are sort of like always a step behind. any kind of regulation, I think.
Any kind of regulation, any
Yeah,
kind of
always a
regulation.
step behind, just trying to catch
No,
up with everything new that it evolves into.
no, regulation always comes into place when the problem exists.
Yeah.
So when the problem takes its complete form and shape, that's when the need for regulation comes in.
Hmm.
Then by the time the regulator takes a complete form and shape, the problem takes a different shape.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
I think,
almost like how we are seeing with COVID, right? We come up with one thing and it evolves, and there are new variants,
yes,
etc. So we are just always running after it. But thank
yes,
you so much, Shashidhar. This is a very, very, very interesting conversation. And I hope that we continue to have more conversations on this. I think one of the things that we have very categorically identified in this is that there is a need for more public conversation on this, perhaps even advocacy with with political parties, with election commission, that this is a thing that needs to be taken much more seriously than it probably is being done right now. And I mean, while it's good that some steps have been taken, I've also like sort of seen like what we saw, the kind of efforts that were being made during the 2019 elections and since then to regulate campaigning online. But there is a need to do much more. So hopefully at One Vote also we'd be able to have more conversations on this issue. And yeah, it'll be great to keep engaging on this in the future as well.
sure. Thanks. Thank you for hosting me. I think we will be connecting again because I'm currently researching on how a regulation can be imagined. I think once that research work is there, I'm sure I would want to present it here again. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yes, yes.